All right. Good evening, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us here tonight. Truth Brigade on AmericanFreedomRadio.com. Our special guest tonight, Val Gameiro. He is a writer, producer, director, IT guy, and so much more, father, husband, etc. It is so good to have you here tonight joining us, Val, from Austin, Texas. Woohoo! Where our station is. Oh, thank you. Thanks for being here tonight. Val, you've traveled a long way from Mozambique, Portugal, L.A., Austin, kind of a world traveler there, huh?
Yes, ma'am. Yeah, I was born in Mozambique, as you said. My folks were there. Mozambique was a Portuguese colony in the 70s before the revolution, which we can get into later. But so I moved from Mozambique to Portugal, where the family was, went to college in England, did a while in Denmark, and then moved to the United States in 95. And ended up here, and after going back and forth in California, Texas, Florida, and Israel, ended here in Austin, Texas about 4 years ago. I had a friend who, was he directed commercials and produced commercials, like, big spots for Coca-Cola and whatnot. And, he was telling me about writing for film, and he gave me this book. And so I started reading that book and realized that, there was an art, it was an art form, and it had certain rules that people expected, and so I had to learn those, and eventually met up with different people, ended up, hooking up with the writers group, ended up running the writers group, met a lot of writers, directors, producers, you name it, and learned about what to do, what not to do, what works, what doesn't. This first feature that I'm working on is a feature that I wrote at that time for that same person.
Now, you mentioned the first one, or what you were working on, was about human trafficking. Is that what I see here, When She Smiles?
Yes, When She Smiles is actually something I did with, I got into human trafficking, or finding out about it, by the same director that I wrote that feature for. The trafficking industry is very near and dear to my heart. For those who don't know, I got in a little trouble myself. Stepping on people's toes. And really at the time, I didn't even really know what I was getting into. I just knew that little girls were being raped, and I just thought, duh, you go and help them, right? And then hopefully the police or FBI or ICE or, somebody is going to take care of it. Problem was, they were the ones that were running it. And, of course, covering it up and then following me around for the last almost 6 years. It's really ugly when you get into it. I was telling you briefly during the break, Val, they were bringing girls, this was in San Diego, so they were bringing girls from across the border to, service their gentlemen, but it was also vice versa. They were also kidnapping girls here and bringing there, and, now I'm living in a place in the Bible Belt where they literally bring girls from all over the world, and they're told, this is a problem. And what I found out when I went in to try to save the girls, a lot of them, they don't even know I can't say they don't know that it's wrong, but they're scared to death because they're told things that, if you ever say anything or run away, your entire family is going to be killed, etc. And so they don't want help. They don't want to get away because they live in fear of what's going to happen to their family. And that was just a really, really huge shocker for me, that they were just so brainwashed that they felt that they had no other option. And then to find out that, I guess I was kind of naive, and I just thought, it was just a few bad guys doing this. And, of course, law enforcement, that's their job. They're going to protect the little children, right? But no, wrong again. And they, of course, were the ones not only continuing it, perpetrating it, covering it up, etc. So, I guess that's why I was shocked that it was only 1 million illegally being trafficked. But this is a worldwide problem. And the big problem, if I may just throw something in there, is that number 1 million is only what they can sort of quantify, because, a lot of people that,
not everyone is a surveillance state like the U.S. is, where everyone's got a passport and a driver's license and, RFID chips on your driver's license, and they can track you all over wherever you go, and cameras everywhere. So in the less developed countries, there's probably a lot more people that are not being tracked, so they don't have any idea exactly. All they can do is, people coming across the borders and all that kind of stuff, quote unquote, legally, and kind of estimate based on those numbers. So, yeah, absolutely, the number is much higher than that. That's just the number that they're able to estimate, with what we currently have. Not that I'm saying that we should have more surveillance everywhere. I think we just teach people how to use guns so that when traffickers come knocking on the door, they just shoot them up, and that's it.
Exactly. I like that solution. But what was really surprising when I got up close and personal with some of the girls involved here in the Bible Belt, they are lured to locations under the auspices of, coming to America, that free country where everything that glitters is gold, right? And so they're so excited at the opportunity to get out of whatever type of situation they're in their country, they don't even know that they're just trading it for another. And some of them are less violent than others. For instance, some of them are more personalized slaves, as opposed to, say, dealing with 30 or 40 guys a day. They deal with one or two, and they're given a job and set up in a hotel or a real nice house, and they just think that that's part of coming to America. They don't even feel like running. They just think that, that's the way it is, and, get out of our business type thing. So I found that really shocking as well. Have you come across situations like that, or are most of your movies and your research based on the more violent type, where they have to service 30-plus people a day or be killed?
Well, basically, I've heard of all kinds of stories from my friend Dottie, but mostly the ones that I've researched have been people who, were forced to do stuff, and, sex, slavery, forced labor. There's all kinds of trafficking. It's not just sex trafficking. There's a restaurant here in Austin that we believe is a human trafficking, ring, because when you go in there, the servers won't look you in the face ever. And when we tried to give them, or actually my friend Dottie tried to give her a tip, she actually looked at the owner, or the person who's sitting there, the handler, so to speak, looked at her first before even accepting the tip, where normally if you go to a restaurant, you give someone a tip, they take the tip, no question.
Yeah. Wow.
And right here in Austin, and she worked in Houston for a while, and there was a ring there. It was basically a brothel, and there were uniformed policemen outside. Now that means uniformed means they're there under the auspices of someone in authority. They wouldn't just be there. If they were off duty, they would be in civilian clothes. But no, they were uniformed officers. And she went there and saw things, and it's crazy. But if you think about it, I think the statistic is it makes so much money. It's second only to the sale in illegal drugs. It's because you can sell these women again and again. You sell them multiple times a night. Once you're done, 6 months later, you pass it to another trafficker, so you won't get caught, or you won't track that person, and so forth. And you can keep going hand to hand to hand, and it's a big moneymaker. Anything that, and because now there's lots of legislation, but it's easier to prosecute these people as prostitutes as opposed to victims of human trafficking, and leave the Johns and the pimps alone. Not just because a lot of times they're connected in the government, they're in high places, they're outstanding members of the community a lot of times, but just because it's easier to just not do that whole thing. But if they get caught, you're talking, you can hit them with RICO, which is like extortion and whatnot, and you can freeze their assets and all kinds of stuff, and they go to jail for a long time. It's the penalties are there.
Yeah,
they're heavy.
The problem is it's the people that would be filing the charges that are at the top of the rings to begin with.
That's exactly the problem.
I just can't even believe that the few cases, they actually charged the slaves themselves with prostitution. Come on.
Well, it's just easy. It's just easy, and the cops, this is here, a true story here in Austin. I went to a meeting where the APD, chief Art Acevedo was, talking this thing about fusion centers. And I went to address him afterwards and say, hey, I have a person who trains on human trafficking. He said, oh, we have everything. We're trained, and it's bull. Because I went and talked to this other guy, and his guy was interested, and he didn't have the training, and they have no or little or no records of arrests on human trafficking. But the chief of police did not care. He gave me this glib, PR answer. Oh, yes, we know everything, and we have everything, and yada, 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 under control. And it's bull.
Yeah, we're working on it. But, hey, revenue, right? We can't prosecute the ones doing the prosecutions, so let's continue to victimize the little people. Oh, my goodness. Wow. I'm really glad that you are involved in this fight. And, there are many ways, of course, to do this, and your way is through movies. You combine the human trafficking element also with the psychiatry industry.
Psychiatry is not a science. I mean, there is no science. If you ask any psychiatrist, they themselves say, we have no way of diagnosing any of our mental illnesses. There is no scientific diagnostic. They don't collect blood samples. They don't do DNA analysis. Nothing. There's no scientific anything other than conjecture. They look at you, ask you a couple of questions, pick up their DSM-4 or 5 now, actually, which is a bull of a manual that with a bunch of diseases that they actually literally sit in a committee once a year and vote on these diseases. Everyone in favor say aye, and these get passed into the manual, and anything and everything is cataloged as something that you can prescribe a drug for, which makes Big Pharma big bucks.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I mean, you're speaking truth. There is no scientific evidence at all behind it. In fact, Dr. Peter Breggin of empathictherapy.org is certainly leading the way on that fight. Been in the industry for, over 50 years now and doing what he can to kind of change things. But he said not one person on those drugs should be on them. He says they all should be off. And when you think about it, it's like, okay, so let's say somebody's having a bad time. Maybe they're depressed, their dog died, their family died, or they lost their home in a tornado, or, regular real-life things that happen. They're so ready to diagnose you, label you with something, give you a drug, and then they treat you so inhumanely. But if somebody's having a hard time, isn't that where we're supposed to be holding their hand, talking to them, not hog-tying them and locking them in rooms naked and drugging them and letting them, drown in their own vomit?
Right, well, that's exactly why I decided to make this film, because a lot of people don't know about it, and they've walked in the coattails of the medical profession and kind of claim that they have all this knowledge, and people just assume because they're recognized that that they're doing something that's good, but in actual fact there is very little science behind it, and let's put it this way. In 1948, the American Psychiatric Association had one of their annual meetings stated that they were going to work, their plan for the future of the world was to eradicate morals, the concept of right and wrong, destroy the building block of society, which is the family unit, which, if you look at those things here in the U.S., they're hard at work. They're going to destroy the education system. They've done it.
Been there, done that.
Right. Now, if you want to take a larger look at this and why they would do that, you can look at the case of Portugal, which we were under a dictatorship until the 60s under a guy called Salazar. And basically what they did was dumb down the population. They had a secret police, which could take anyone at any time and make them disappear, like if they spoke against the government, which coincidentally Obama passed a law allowing the U.S. military to do just that, which is very scary, but hey.
Well, hey, they've been doing it all along anyways, so they might as well make it legal, right?
Right.
Why did you get into this? I mean, why were you led to produce this film, Val?
Well, like I was saying earlier, I mean, Michael and Dottie introduced me to the whole concept of human trafficking, and I just had to do something about it. And, because of all the research I've done in the realm of what psychiatry is doing in terms of violating human rights, I decided I just had to do something. And as a writer, and at this point I had become a filmmaker, writing a film about it was the next thing I could do. Obviously, other than just tell people about it and, attend seminars, promote seminars, whatever I can do. So I wrote this script based on this research that I've done on both sides because they're equally important. They're both human rights violations of the most fragile people. I mean, human trafficking victims are picked because they are people who are alone, have no friends generally, and are just helpless. And same thing with people in institutions. They're our most frail people, like children. They're sitting there. They need help more than anyone else because they're not able to fend for themselves. And here we are raping them. Not necessarily literally, but raping them with drugs, with violence, using them for slave labor or sex slavery, whatever. And again, back to the whole APA meeting in 1948, it's, why would anyone want to do that if they want control? This is all really about control, mind control, control of, different ways of every aspect of our lives. So this is my stab in their hearts. This is my way of telling them, here's what you're doing. And really, the only way to defeat these people is to expose what they're doing, their lies and what they're doing. Only in the light of truth will they fade away, because they can't fend that off. If you're showing the truth, you show that psychiatrists are killing people, well, they can't fend that off because it did happen. It's documented. They can't say, oh, no, it's good. Electroshock is good because it helps people, and they say that.
Yeah, they do.
And they show these examples of people who have been, electrocuted, and they're sitting there smiling, and they're like brain dead. A friend of mine who received ECT, he said he was, disoriented for days, and he was vomiting and all this kind of stuff. It didn't help him at all. It just killed a bunch of brain cells. Yay, huzzah!
Yeah,
that's therapy. That comes from shocking pigs in the slaughterhouses. They electrocute the pigs.
Doctor, wasn't it Salenti?
Ugo Cerletti.
Yeah, who I guess that was like considered a major modern advancement in psychiatry, going to where the pigs were being slaughtered, to base that on what we call therapy today.
Because
nice modern advancement, huh?
After being electrocuted, the pigs would be docile. They wouldn't, they would just sit there calmly and do whatever. And they could cut their throats in peace. So they could bleed to death. So, and there's all these different things like the prefrontal lobotomy.
Bloodletting was actual psychotherapy.
Yeah, it was just even medical therapy as leeches and whatnot. It's my way of exposing these things and telling people, look, this is what this is all about. Here's actual cases of what's happened, and they can't fend that off. So people will become alert about that, about human trafficking. If they have someone who's in an institution, they'll help get them out. If they witness someone that could be a trafficking victim, help them out of it. That's my hope, is that they will do something with this information and we'll have a better place, which ultimately, as an artist, I think that is our responsibility as artists, is to make the world a better place. We, better than anyone else, create the future by putting ideas in film and fiction and music. We create these things. If we talk about, gangster rap and, robbing people and having sex and all that stuff, that's what we get. If we put something positive out there, that's what we'll get, and that's my mission, is to put something out there that make people want to do something.
Yeah, absolutely. My God, I thank you for doing that. Because it's so tragic. And even when people do escape and they talk about it, it doesn't matter what agency you're from, or psychologist or therapist or whatever, they still try to tell you that it's not real. Oh, there's no such thing as ritual abuse, and oh no, of course you weren't brought up, and they do whatever they can to, on all sides of the fence. So the medical, the pharmaceutical, the politicians, all of it is like, nope, it's not happening. They all turn a blind eye to it. So,
it's funny because in the Roman times, the slaves, they wanted to pass a law to have all the slaves walk around with armbands, like white armbands on their arms. And someone in the Senate said, no, we shouldn't do that, because then they will notice how many of them there are.
Wow.
Regardless of how many military they throw at us, how many police they throw at us, how many politicians they throw at us, how many traffickers they throw at us, we are much more in number. If
That's
the whole,
true.
I mean, Austin has 1 million people. If all of the troops around here in Fort Hood and the other fort down here, I forget the name of it right now, if they were to line them all up and all the citizens were to line up, we would surround them. They could shoot all of us. We'd still have enough people to fight back.
Yeah, so where are the people? Why are they so afraid? Val, let me ask you this. Do you have any personal experience in either of these issues, the trafficking or the psychiatry industry?
Well, personally, my stepson, I used to call him my son, but my son was, before we got married, he was put on Ritalin for about a year on and off. My wife then took him off it because she didn't like what was happening with him. And then later on she found out about what the drugs were really doing. But after that, he was a great student. You know, he was, of course, hyperactive, quote unquote, which means he was a normal kid, full of life and energy. And the drugs took that out of him. But afterwards, after she weaned him off, the effects were that it led him to get hooked up on street drugs like cocaine, and he started with pot and then worked his way up to cocaine and different things, huffing, etc. And we spent the last, from 13 till 8 until 19 handling that. He was in rehab for about a year, and then he finally got clean at his own request. He told us at the time if we had delayed 1 month, when we found out that he was on drugs, if we had waited more than a month after that point, he probably would have been dead because of all the things, the amounts of drugs. Every night he was doing drugs and all this stuff. So, it was just in the nick of time, so to speak. A drug is basically a poison. In very simple terms, a little wakes you up, more of it sends you to sleep, enough of the drug fast enough kills you. That's true of heroin. That's true of, like household poisons, anything taking like a little bit, like even beer. A little wakes you up, you kind of get happy and stuff. You take more of it, you fall asleep, you're too drunk and you fall asleep. If you were able to consume enough alcohol at one time, you would die. It's a poison. So, and then understand that, and any psychiatrist, if anyone ever tells you that you have this and that and the other, you ask them, okay, good, thank you so much for letting me know. Where's the test that you're basing this diagnostic on?
Yes.
Where's the test? Because you're saying there's something wrong with my chemical imbalance in the brain or something. Well, where's my brain analysis?
Yeah, what chemical? Show it to me. I mean, I think they've already proven that there is no such thing as a chemical imbalance other than that which is imposed upon one after taking those drugs.
Right.
So,
imagine, there's I think 8 out of 10 people around you. Maybe not 8. Actually, it's probably less than that. It's probably like 5, 6, or 7 people around of every 10 that are on some medication. If you go to any group and ask them, you will see big numbers saying, yes, I'm on some sort of medication.
Yeah. Oh, I don't take drugs. I'm just taking, this for sleep and that for my heart condition and this for my depression. And it's like, okay, sorry. A drug is a drug is a drug.
Right. And, of course, there are conditions, but a drug is a poison, not a solution. Exactly. When I grew up, drugs were always something that people took to mask a problem because they couldn't face it, whatever the problem might be. So... But the society has been so, fed with this. You have the commercials on TV. You have people talking about why it's so good to take a drug, and just don't have to actually be responsible and face the consequences and be and self-responsible about what you did. Take a pill and forget about it.
Yeah, and unfortunately, a lot of people do choose that for themselves, even when they do have the knowledge behind them and. I guess that's their path. It, probably is a little bit easier, or it may seem so.
that's the thing. It's just a person who takes a drug normally is there's something they can't face, and they take it in order to reduce the stress that causes them. That problem. So really, if you want to help someone, help them face the problem. There's no other way. You have to face it sooner or later. My son had to face everything after he got off the drugs. He had to face the things that had led him to do that. And that was the only way of breaking free, of really being free, is to face it. There's no other way. You have to go through it. And that's just life. If you shy away from it, first of all, you're missing out on life because you're too afraid to live, or to whatever degree.
Yes.
And really, once you face it, a lot of times you find it really wasn't that bad. And I mean, there's plenty of people who've lived through horrors like you and like the people I've interviewed, and they're still living.
Yes, we're here.
And you'll find that most people who are on some sort of drug and whatever, they're not doing as much as they would otherwise.
Mm-hmm.
And some aren't doing anything at all.
Absolutely. We have to come to a point where we stop giving our power away, or just, sit back and expect the government, whoever that is, to fix it for us. Because, history shows us they're not really fixing anything.
Right. I come from a country that turned socialist a few years ago, right around the time that I left, and it's it's a shambles. The medical system is disgraceful. Like, my grandfather has to wait months to go, and if he needs to see a doctor, he has a waiting list of 2 months. If he dies in the meantime, too bad. And they have quote unquote a version of Obamacare, and it's crazy. Governments are a big machine, a faceless machine that thinks about numbers and laws in black and white.
I'm so glad they care about us so much. They're going to force us to have Obamacare. Isn't that sweet?
Oh, it's very, very nice. Enforced by the IRS. I love that.
Yeah.
It's so nice.
Oh,
but they themselves don't get that. They get their own multi-million-dollar, thousands of dollars, good health care that no one else gets. It's very democratic.
Yeah, there was something came up recently. I can't remember if it was Australia or New Zealand, but they are now, if you refuse to vaccinate your children, you can't claim them and get your exemptions on your tax return.
Right.
Wow. Oh, my goodness. Okay, well, let's, you shared with us one of the stories in your film. Can you tell us about the other characters and the stories that they stemmed from?
There's a character called Rose, and she's an older woman, played by a good friend of mine, Pamela Denise Weaver, and she plays a role of a lady who's in there, and at some point she goes a little crazy. She loses control. She starts screaming, and the orderlies grab her. They duct tape the pillow around her head and throw her into a bedroom. And this is based on an actual story of what they did to someone in an institution, and the person then later on suffocated. And that's what happens to her in the film.
Wow. Gosh, things like this make me want to go infiltrate a psych ward, or, say, hi, I'm crazy, let me in. And,
you don't want to do that.
Go minister to everyone there and say, hey.
Well, here's the thing. If you there's something called the Baker Act, for instance. And the Baker Act is a law that was passed, that if someone calls in and says, oh, he's acting crazy, there's, I forget what the requirements are, but basically a friend of mine was Baker Acted, a good friend of mine. She was upset with her boyfriend because he was being a douchebag, and, sorry, pardon my French again, but essentially they called the neighbors, and the guy called the police on her, and she was institutionalized for up to 36 or 72 hours. Forced drugging.
Oh yeah, that's all it takes is a phone call. Anyone can call and say anything about their family member, their neighbor, boyfriend, girlfriend, etc. And you have cops beating down your door, hog-tying you, and taking you to an institution. Minimum 72 hours.
Right.
How insane is that? No questions asked, of course. Kind of like the judicial system, but oy.
Yeah, and there's actually a group called CCHR, the Citizens Commission on Human Rights. They have a huge, very good track record. If you ever know of someone who has been institutionalized against their will, or you want to get them out, and you can't because they make more money with people in there than out. So you call them up in your state, they're in a bunch of states, and these people have such a good track record, and the psychiatry industry is so afraid of them that they will literally usher the person almost immediately out the door when they hear their name. And you'll get someone, call them up, and they'll call the hospital directly. And I've heard more than one story where they'll just usher the person out because they dedicate their lives to exposing psychiatric violations of human rights. And you go to cchr.org, and they document these things in videos and, complaints. They file lawsuits against them. They get a bunch of people arrested. It's crazy, the amount of violations that the psychiatry profession commits against us that you don't hear about. Because Eli Lilly and big companies like that have multi-billion-dollar budgets, and they spend a lot of money in their PR ushering, quieting things up.
Yeah, this is such a mess. I wish I could tell you about some of my experiences, but gosh, I think they gave me such good drugs, I forgot it. So, boy. Val, talking about these things is, as I said before, it's very near and dear to my heart. Maybe not as pleasant, not the most pleasant discussion ever, but, and I'm trying to remember things that I went through, because I briefly told you before the show, I was forced drugged from the time I was a child, most of my life, in fact, and, I was trying to remember some of the things that happened to me or others when we were locked up, and really the only, there's a few memories, waking up screaming in bed and things like that, but other than that, the only thing I really remember is I first was put into this room, and it was, I don't know, like all metal and cement, kind of like a jail cell, but smaller, and I kept begging to go to the bathroom. There wasn't even a toilet or anything in there, so it was like worse than a jail cell. And, they were just like staring at me through this little window, and, they wouldn't let me go to the bathroom. They wouldn't give me a cup or anything. So finally I just peed on the floor. And so then I got their attention. They all came in and, manhandled me, beat me up, so to speak. And that was the last thing I remember. Wow. So it's just, I don't know, these drugs, cause so much damage. Of course, memory loss is one of them. What are your experiences with that?
Well, I have no experience with drugs. I've never taken one in my whole life. But from studying the topics and so forth, basically your mind is like a movie. You start, from the time you're born to the time you die, your mind is constantly taking pictures, and that becomes your memory. You can remember the last thing you ate, the last time you saw a cat. It's, in normal situations, it works like that. When you take a drug, it jumbles all that, footage, let's say. It jumbles it all up. And so you have a hard time remembering. You have a hard time remembering when things happened. It mixes memories together. It just jumbles all this thing up. It jumbles your mind.
Yes.
So that's why you experience that. And what we were talking about earlier in the break is that it is scary, is that these drugs are not like, say pot, that is a natural drug that has a hallucinogenic effects or whatever. They're designer drugs that are created to mess you up, to mess up your mind, to mess up with your memories and all this kind of stuff. It's not happenstance. It's designed to inflict harm.
Yeah.
It's nuts. How do these guys sleep at night? I couldn't.
Yeah, here, we're going to help you by screwing you up for life and erasing your memories and shocking you. And that's so humane. Thank you so much.
And take a big paycheck.
Yeah. If I ever do remember anything else, I will definitely, feel free to share. It's my show. I can do that. But I just don't remember. I can't tell you of any more experiences in that type of setting at this time, unfortunately. And I fear, this was, I don't know, decades ago. And just to think that, are all these memories going to be gone forever?
Right. Well, like anything, it's drugs, and that's one thing that a lot of people don't know, is like drugs stay in your fatty tissues for years and years after you've taken them. So a person who took LSD in the 70s, 30 years later, can still experience a flashback.
Are you saying I need to lose more fat?
No, not at all. I'm saying you need to go through a detox and cleanse the drugs out of your system.
Okay, all right. I guess my detox didn't work.
Yeah. And because drugs do a lot of things to your body, like destroy vitamins and things like that. So you have to get rid of the old fatty tissue, that's in there, replace it with good fat that's clean and not, full of junk. take vitamins and all this other stuff to kind of combat the ill effects of the drugs. So, and that's, you can, I'm sure you can regain your memory based on that, after doing something like that. My son, he went through that, so, I know what he went through and what happened with him. So it is possible, but, it's like, why even do that in the first place? How evil are you that you'd wreak that on a person? When I grew up and my friend had a problem, he was sad because he couldn't get with this girl or she didn't pay attention to him or whatever, we would talk. Mm-hmm. We would actually sit there and chat, and heck, I couldn't give him any good advice because I didn't know any better either, but I would just listen. And how crucial is and how valuable is it to just sit there and listen?
Absolutely.
And say, oh my God, I can't believe that happened. Oh, I'm so sorry.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, just lend a helping hand, or instead of, the whole, patients who are suffering, say, depression, PTSD, they brought up bipolar, things like that. They've been so demonized that when, in fact, there's somebody that comes into my work, and, I was able to help him in the last few days. I don't really want to get into that, but I mentioned to somebody, that I was helping him, and they looked at me and they're like, oh, he needs a lot of help, like psychotherapy and drugs. And I just looked at him and, that is not what he needs, just, right. Somebody to listen and, but to be told they're crazy, you stay away from that person, right? But if you look at everybody that's taking these drugs, then that would mean what? 60-70% of the people are crazy, right?
Uh-huh. That's what they want you to think.
But they've managed to have friends. So they become completely isolated or hate themselves and isolate themselves, of course, out of fear and what people are going to do to them or think of them or point fingers. And, most of this is brought on, in my experience, not just my own personal experience, but all the people I've talked to that have gone through this, it's just something normal. Somebody gets depressed over something which is a totally normal human reaction. Think about it. If your family was slaughtered in front of your eyes, or say you're sent off to war to murder a bunch of innocent people, and obviously you see some things, you're going to be a little bit kind of weirded out, and you're going to have to deal with some things. And instead, here, take this little pill, and, then we better stay away from you because you're crazy, right? These people don't want to hurt anyone. In fact, the depression and all of these things we're talking about were not associated with violence in any way until after these drugs were introduced. And then you look at the school shootings and, all of these other things that have been brought to our attention, all of them were on some sort of drug that was helping them.
Quote unquote. Absolutely. That's absolutely true. The whole Columbine thing, and even the Killeen shooting that we had here in Texas, that's a funny story because the guy who did the shooting was a psychiatrist, and he was shooting other psychiatrists.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like that.
Not a lot.
Sorry. Did I say that out loud? My Tourette's must be acting out again. Yeah. I need a pill.
Me too. But see, it's what's interesting is that it started. They're now attacking the military. They're now saying that PTSD and all that stuff. They need to give these people these psychotropic medications. Which, if you read just some of the warnings, the label warnings on these things, Ritalin, for instance. What is one of the side effects of withdrawal from Ritalin? Like if you take a kid on Ritalin and take away all the Ritalin, suicide. Mm-hmm. Why would you want to put your kid on a Schedule II drug, which is cocaine, is a Schedule II drug? Mm-hmm. If you are not a trained chemist, you can't tell the difference between cocaine and Ritalin. Literally, this is true.
Yeah.
Why would you want to give that to your kid?
Very good point, and super advice there, Val. I'm sorry, but you parents out there that aren't listening to your children and your first solution is, go to the doctor, give them drugs because you don't want to hear their outbursts or you don't want to hear what they're really painting about, you are part of the problem.
Absolutely, and that's very true. And really, every single, and people are going to hate me for saying this, but I have personal experience with my son. Every unruly, difficult child, you're over-controlling. You're not letting them live their lives. If you were to put as much control, if anyone was to put as much control on you as you put on your kids, you would rebel just as much as them, and you do anything you can to prove that you're an individual and you have your own self-determinism, and you're a person. And that's why you end up getting all these crazy things and drugs and problems and weird behavior and, hating parents and all that stuff. We do that a lot. And I'm not without guilt in that department either. I had to learn the hard way. So I tell everyone, look, obviously, you have to give them boundaries, and those boundaries should be strict, and they'll try and push them, and you want to make sure that they're steady, and you have an unvariable code of conduct. But, you have to let them live their life, make their own decisions, think for themselves. By doing that, you allow them to blossom, to be who they are, and then they'll in turn do that, and help someone else and let them be themselves. And you create this, mass effect, this shockwave of good intent and positive stuff that makes the world a better place. Versus, yelling at kids and suppressing them and, and all this
drugging them because you're too lazy to be a parent and allow them to be children.
And you know what? All of us need help. Someone said it takes a village to raise a child. And that is why psychiatry has been attacking that building block, because then, parents and uncles and grandparents aren't working together. They just want to throw the kid. You hear about it in the U.S. all the time. They can't wait till the kid grows up so they can throw him out of the house. I'm from Portugal. My mom still calls me. We speak every weekend, and she would love if I lived next door to her, and we saw each other every day. We're a Latin culture, so, we're used to that. We like that. Family is important. But the U.S. has been severely attacked, and it's a shame, because that is the building block of society. And, and people are awesome. People help you, and they give you information you didn't have before. And if, you're like, your hands are piled with stuff at the grocery store, they'll help you carry some stuff to the car. Isn't that so much better, to know your neighbors and to go around and just, my dream, this is one of my utopic dreams, would be to walk down the street somewhere and know everybody on either side and say hello to everybody. That would make me so happy.
That would be nice, wouldn't it?
Like a small big town.
Well, I like your dream, and I'm loving what you're doing here with your films. And I really appreciated you coming on the show with us today and telling us all about this. Thank you. And thank you all for joining us here tonight.
Thank you for all you do.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that. Abundant blessings and love to all.